So when we hear the phrase traditional parenting, we usually think about how older people did things during their time. And I think the word traditional is often connected with things like, being old-fashioned. And when you say something is old-fashioned, it's something that's outdated. It's something that, well, if you use the word in Filipino, laos na yan, hindi na yan uso, right? And so, also, it refers to something traditional. And, to make things simple, this is something that we commonly associate, when you speak of traditional parenting, there are, I would say, certain artifacts that you would find at home that remind you of that. It's either the belt, the slipper, sometimes it's the hanger or the broom. You get shouted at, you get yelled at, you are expected to deliver very high grades all the time, you're expected to perform at all levels, and you're expected to obey without question, okay? So, being older than, a number of you guys here, I would say that, yeah, that's the kind of parenting I grew up with. I think among those artifacts, I was most familiar with the belt because that's what my dad used a lot on me when I was small. And I didn't get A pluses. In fact, I think it produced the opposite effect because when I was growing up, I got low grades. And it seems like that wasn't very effective on me. So when parents expect their children to follow authority as well as comply with their cultural beliefs and values, in this case, parents rule and the children are simply expected to follow. This typically refers to as the authoritarian style of parenting. Authoritarian, you think of that in terms of government, you think of tyrants and the way they use force and violence to make the people follow and submit. Parents impose strict and rigid rules on children and use fear or punishment as the motivation. It's like, okay, if you don't do this, you're going to get punished. So therefore, you might as well do it. And I think that's something that maybe the traditional kind of parenting has been, doing for quite a while. When parents expect their children to respect and obey authority as well as comply with their cultural beliefs, in this case, the parents rule and the children submit to the will of their parents. Now, in response to traditional parenting, I think I would refer to the next one as modern parenting because, well, traditional, old-fashioned, modern may be referring to something that's new, something that's relevant, something that's timely, something that's fashionable. So perhaps as a reaction to that, these are parents who don't want their kids to go through the same thing. Now we have here the emergence of a new parenting style. So this new trend prioritizes freedom, creativity, and the feelings of children. I'm not sure how to call it exactly, but it goes by many names. But let's just call it, modern parenting to contrast it from traditional parenting. And this is what we typically associate with at least contemporary modern parenting. You have the iPad or the tablet, a device which is used as not only an entertaining tool, but also, as you know, a great pacifier. Works on kids, works great on adults too, okay, as you know. And then you have here, well, the lollipop there to signify for me instant gratification because kids are not supposed to wait. And finally, you're only supposed to give good feelings for your kid. Now, I say this because I'm not sure where it started, but I've heard it many times, especially from older people, iba na kasing bata ngayon. It's like the practices of old are no longer applicable because in their view, children have changed. But I'm not so sure if that really is the case because I've been looking for literature to support that idea and I haven't really found any to say that the kids today are different from before. Not to say that millennials, Gen Zs, and Gen Xers are all the same or different. I'm just saying that I don't think it's really the children that have changed, but it could be the environment, it could be the parenting style, it could be, I don't know, our response to that, and that's something that I notice. So there's a lot of talk here about breaking the cycle. If parents were quite harsh back then, this was replaced with, gentle parenting practices. Letting their kids do what they want, supporting them on whatever thing that they do, and basically indulging their children. However, this can also be problematic. And I think you know this a lot when you think about how children end up becoming spoiled. In fact, I'll give you an example. So I talked about my childhood growing up, right? And not naman that my parents were absolutely harsh, but I went through that, like maybe some of you have done as well. Now, funnily, now that I'm a father, I have kids, and my dad, who's the grandfather of my kids, has a chance to be a father again. Now he indulges them in everything that they want. And sabi ko, Dad, that's not good. Why do you keep giving him or her, why do you keep giving the kids what they want, what they're asked for, without making them wait, without even telling them that that's good for them? Why do you keep doing that? And one of my friends had a very good way of explaining it. For grandparents, the motto is, it's their job to spoil the kids, and it's the parents' problem to discipline them. So, it's kind of like, if you're an adult, a parent, you're caught in the middle. Like, you wanna raise your kid in the way that you want, but at the same time, you also don't want to offend your parents. So you're caught in the middle, literally and figuratively. And the other reason for that, I think, is, okay, so what about parents who refuse to discipline their kids? There are many reasons for that. Probably there's guilt, there's shame, there's the idea that, okay, I don't want my kids to go through what I've been through. But also at the same time, there's also this fear that disciplining children, instilling in them, rules and stuff, will break their spirit and will make their kids dislike them. And that's something that I think most parents fear. And that's something which a lot of parents do not like. But unfortunately, that also has some negative effects. So even modern parenting has its own problems. Contrary to popular belief, children, especially the little ones, like being helpful and useful. They want to participate in what people are doing. And they want to be able to do things on their own. They appreciate it not only when they are praised and thanked for what they did, but they appreciate it when they're able to do something themselves. My 3-year-old likes doing things, and if I prevent him from doing so, he gets a bit sad. And when he succeeds in doing it, even if I don't say anything positive, even if I don't affirm him, he's very happy, he's very pleased with the fact that he was able to do something. So, it's good to have that. And really, the truth is, children do appreciate guidance and direction. It's not always a bad thing. So, if ever, don't be afraid to do that. In other words, it is certainly good for children to be challenged while being supported and guided by their parents along the way. The right approach to parenting, I would argue here, is one which is demanding, asks a lot from your children, challenges them to do difficult things. Why? Because it's only in doing difficult things that people actually become good. But at the same time, these kids, because they're small, because they're young, need support, need help. They can't do things alone, or maybe not all at the same time. And that's why I would argue that what we need right now is a parenting which I would refer to as authoritative parenting, in which parents remain as figures of authority, but do not use authoritarian techniques or practices on their kids. So authoritative parenting isn't a simple matter of finding a balance between the two, because both are still driven by doctrine, but authoritative parenting is focused on the good of the child. This requires, of course, a little backtracking because, we need to revisit some things a little bit. So, here I'd like to talk about, parenting as a gift. This is what changes the game, I would argue. So, we've heard of it all before. Parenthood is a wonderful thing. At least maybe that's what parents tell themselves so they don't feel so bad about what they got themselves into. But it's often touted as the most wonderful thing, the best thing that could ever happen to couples, to a person, to married couples, in fact. I don't really disagree with that, but I will offer something different. So, please bear with me for a bit. So, when I think of parenting as a gift, I first think in terms of what is given, and secondly, in terms of who gives the gift. Because, you talk about the gift, these are things that you're thinking about. So, is it the case that parenthood is the path to something, or is parenthood the actual gift itself? And second, if it's the latter, that parenthood is in fact the gift, the question is, who gives the gift? Of course, it's not something which we can answer easily, and I will borrow from my philosophical background here, and so I'd like to express that idea, okay? So parenthood, obviously, is not the sort of thing which a parent simply gives to himself or herself. It's not something which you can give to yourself. It must come from another source. The giver in this case is none other than the child, which is surprising because you're thinking, sir, how can a child give a gift when he or she is not even there? Well, hear me out here, okay? It is by virtue of the arrival of the child that man and woman, husband and wife, adults, become parents. It's not of their own effort, but it's because the child comes in and grants them the title, parent, that they, in fact, become parents. Let me spell it out for you. So now what is a gift? It is something that you neither earn nor deserve, contrary to popular belief. It's something that you don't even ask for. In fact, if you ask for a gift, it's not a gift anymore. It doesn't make sense. Okay? A gift comes surprisingly, unexpectedly, usually without hint or warning. And it is a sort of thing, because it's something which you did not expect, something which you didn't plan for. It is a sort of thing which causes you a sense of unease, grief, anxiety, and sometimes even as far as dread and despair. But at the same time, it's also the sort of thing which awakens joy, elation, and exuberance in the individual. Like you're just so happy to be given something, especially if it's something you think is too much for you to bear. For a gift is recognized as a good thing, its recipient, by its recipient, and so it also calls for a proper response. When we receive a gift, typically, we respond lovingly to that gift. We've all received gifts in the past, and we can't help but be grateful and appreciate that gift, but also of the giver of that particular gift. And its meaning and response, its value, we acknowledge and recognize, and we respond accordingly. In this case, parenthood is not the only gift, because not only are the parents granted the title, status, rank, and I would even argue privilege, but also burden and responsibility, but now the child is also a gift unto the parents. It's the gift of the child to them. The child comes as a gift. This all happens simultaneously, but this is also something which transcends time, because this gift is something which does not cease to be a gift the moment it is given. It continues, it persists, it lasts for a long time. And it is not something that is tied or limited to the present. In other words, it transcends time, so to speak. The best response to these gifts, of course, is one of love and responsibility. At its core, love is best understood as wanting, willing, and actively pursuing the good of the beloved, of the person you want. I mean, yeah, there are strong feelings attached to it, but ultimately, when you love someone, you want to do good for that person. You want to bring goodness in that person's life. We have a beautiful word for love in Filipino, which is, well, the word, I would translate love as pagmamahal in Filipino. Of course, you know the word pag-ibig, but I prefer to use pagmamahal for a very good reason here. So love can be translated as pagmamahal because the word pagmamahal comes from the word mahal, which means something that's expensive, but also something that's valuable. It derives from the words may halaga and mataas ang halaga. That's exactly why it's mahal. Here, to put it simply, someone loved, ang taong mahal mo, is someone that you value. Love is the response to the beloved and her value, and love is also a way by which we increase that person's value. When you love someone, you want him or her to be better, and you actually do things to make that person's life better. We all know what it's like to love someone, and this certainly puts, not just having strong feelings for the other, but also entails putting the good, the happiness, and the welfare of the other above yours. That's why people who love are willing to sacrifice themselves. I would even argue that at the end of the day, I would even say that loving costs the self. It costs me, my life, and myself when I love someone. Applied to our topic on parenting, loving parents put the good of their children as the most important thing that they're working on together, meaning they both work on the same thing, even if they're doing very different things. Loving parents are also committed and adaptable because children are not static and fossilized entities. They're very dynamic, they grow, they develop, they change. You have to adjust and adapt to their needs and what's good for them in that given situation. Now, what about the next word? I said responsibility. So when you talk about responsibility, we're thinking here that children are entrusted to their parents, And the parents are now responsible for their children. But what does it mean to be responsible? So we translate responsibility as pananagutan in Filipino. And if you know you're Filipino, the root word of pananagutan is sagot. Of course, normally, we don't really use the word, or we don't really say pananagutan kita in Filipino, but casually, we hear things like, sagot kita, and that also means akong bahala sa'yo. But what does that mean? It means that when you say that you are responsible for someone, these are just not just words of reassurance, but they're also statements of one's conviction. To be responsible is to answer to someone, sasagutin kita, ako ang bahala sa'yo. That's what you're saying when you take responsibility for someone. And here, the responsibility that you're taking on as a parent is a very noble one. Parenthood means taking responsibility for the lives of children that have been entrusted onto you. Yeah, they were given to you, but now that they're yours, now that you are their assigned parent, you have to do something for them. And when responsibility is abdicated and avoided, then the whole thing becomes meaningless and, perhaps downright dreadful and problematic. Now, of course, we all know that we can't do everything alone, okay? There's a saying that, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that's really true. And I think we see that a lot happening in the Philippines, where you have a lot of, I would say, we augment parenting by employing a team of helpers, which are in the form of relatives, friends, and sometimes literally helpers or people, next close to us. And so, because parenting is a very difficult task, and it entails a lot of risk. For starters, children who do not grow up well end up having a difficult time integrating into society. I mean, I know not everything's determined by parenting, but parenting plays a very huge impact in terms of a person's success in society as well. Of course, parents can only do so much. And there are many factors which can play a huge influence on the parenting and the growth of the children. But this is not the most common thing out there. This also is the reason why the world outside the family should support the parents, should be helping the parents do their job, even if it's not exactly them who's doing everything. Parents need help in order for them to carry out their most important duties and their most important tasks. One of the worst things that could happen, of course, is that the efforts of parents are constantly being undermined by the government, by media, culture, religion, society, practically the world. It's so hard to parent these days when you want to raise your kids in a certain way and the whole world is trying to raise them in a different way. Of course, we're not really there at whether who gets it right or who gets it wrong, but that's one specific and clear challenge that parents go through when they encounter such realities. And so, if we take it upon ourselves to be more loving and more responsible, then we could help make the world a better place for ourselves and for the people around us. So maybe in our own little way, we can contribute to helping parents parent their children in the best possible way. Now, some words to end. Abandon reciprocity and embrace unconditionality. So let me give you some time to explain this. In many things, we always ask the question, is it worth it? Apparently, that's something that many young people ask nowadays whenever they're about to do something. Is it worth it? Am I going to get what I want in the end? In fact, we measure the worth of our efforts in terms of what we will get in return. If we think that our efforts will be rewarded sufficiently and satisfactorily, then we continue, we persevere, we go along. But after all, we don't want our efforts to be wasted. But this logic of commerce and exchange is not exactly the most applicable thing for parenting. In fact, when it comes to things that matter most of us, this sort of logic is something which really falls short, is something which cannot account for the way that we're supposed to be living. No proper parent wishes anything bad for their children. They only want what's best for them. However, every now and then, they would like to see the fruits of their labor. They would like to see some kind of reward for the good things that they've done. They'd like to see some kind of, proof that they've succeeded or they've done something well. But this sort of thinking is dangerous because, we all know how intoxicating and addicting reciprocity, getting affirmation from others, can be. And sometimes we might end up doing that with our kids. That is, we could end up doing things for others just so that others will do the same for us. Meaning, we don't do things for the sake of doing good, but we do good things for the sake of being rewarded in the end. If we think this way, then we've put our good above the good of others. And parents could end up simply using their kids for self-gratification and self-affirmation. Remember, there was a mention earlier about, kids becoming retirement plans, and yeah, that could be it. When you're simply doing this so that in the future, you'll be taken care of. Reciprocity, though, is preferable, but in no way measures one's success in doing good. Just because people don't appreciate your effort doesn't mean that you did something wrong or you did something bad. Reciprocity is not the measure, okay? Parents should focus solely on loving their children in the best possible way in order to be a gift unto others as well. And so, with that, I would even argue that reciprocity is neither mandatory nor obligatory. It's nice to have, but don't make it the measure of the things that you do or the success or failure for activities. Parental love is often described as unconditional, a love which puts no conditions on the other. As far as children are concerned, this means that parents will love their children even if they are not loved in return. I think that's exactly what parents are capable of doing, which is why parents are sometimes a totally different animal compared to maybe most people. They can do such things. From the Bible as well, we hear stories about unconditional love, like, the prodigal son and the Good Samaritan. The prodigal son is a very good example because the prodigal son there killed his father twice, figuratively. The first one, when he asked for his inheritance, and then the second one, when he was rejecting being accepted by the father again. Treat me like one of your servants. And that was the father welcoming him again. And he said, no. I'm not your son. I'm not worthy. But the father still took him in anyway. It's, that's loving without asking for anything in return. I would like to point out that there's another meaning behind unconditional love. And this is something which I talk about quite heavily. Not only is it understood as loving without any condition, but here, I would also add that unconditional love also means loving under any condition. Where does this lead us? Of course, when you talk about unconditional love, well, think about it. Earlier I said that parents owe their children, right? Because it's by virtue of the child that adults become parents. But the other question is, okay, but do kids owe their parents? By default, I would say no. Of course, that might stir some, not so good feelings. But let me explain. What I mean there is that, okay, children do not exactly owe their parents, but it's good for them to respond lovingly. And this is where I put the virtue and value of gratitude into the picture. They respond to their parents, they love them, not because they owe them love, but because they appreciate the gift that has been given to them by their parents. My contention here is that parents should be the exemplars of love and responsibility in the home. As I always say in my class, from others we learn how to be, and from others we learn how to love. I will end this with a line which I hear quite a lot from my advisor and teacher, Dr. Leovina Garcia. Some of you might know him, or some of you might have met him. And he always said this to me. And I think this is also something that we could also apply as parents and as children, as citizens of this country. Be good because it's good to be good. You don't need the reward. You don't need any other reason to do good other than the fact that the thing that you're doing is a good thing in itself. So yeah, I said parenting is familiar. We all grew up with it, literally, figuratively. But there's a lot that we could still learn from it. And there's a lot that we can actually advance as far as parenting is concerned. I talk to many people about parenting. I listen to their thoughts, to their ideas. And I think we all know for a fact that there are no perfect parents. Perfect in the sense that they make no mistakes and are absolutely flawless. But parents who really have their best, the best interests of their kids at heart, will do whatever it is in their capacity to do to help their kids to grow and to flourish, so that one day, these kids will grow up to become gifts who can become gifts to others well. So for all of us here, let's make good choices. Thank you very much.